Hey guys, Miss Alas here. So welcome to week 2 of summer school. So this week for reading, we're going to be focusing on two different genres. We're going to be focusing on fiction and nonfiction. So for 2 days, we're going to look at fiction. On day 1, you're going to look through this Edpuzzle, or you're going to attend the live Zoom meeting with me. And then on day 2, Tuesday, you're going to take a test over fiction. On Wednesday, you'll do the same for nonfiction. Okay, so let's go ahead and get started with the lesson. So, for this week, our objective is I can identify the story elements of a fiction story using the three little pigs. So we're going to be looking at A, what is a fiction story? B, what are some elements of a fiction story? And C, identifying them on our own. So let's go ahead. Okay, so before we even get started on the elements, we have to go over what is fiction. So there's actually two types of fiction. There's just regular fiction, which are books that tell a story that is not real. So fiction books are books that have characters that absolutely are not real. For example, right here, this Five Nights of Freddy guy, he cannot be real. I know some of us wish he was real or want to pretend he was real, or he's even probably real in some of our nightmares, but he is not a real character. Same thing for Goosebumps. Here in Goosebumps, you have a lot of characters like talking crocodiles and ghosts and goblins and stuff. Those cannot be real either, so those would be considered fiction. Same goes for Harry Potter. Even though Harry Potter is very interesting, it is fiction because we don't have like what is Hagrid? Hagrid would be considered like a giant. We don't have giants, we don't have witches, we don't have any of that. So those would be considered fiction books. Then we also have realistic fiction, which are fiction stories that are not real but have characters that could be real. So those would be on this side. So for example, Dork Diaries, even though the book is not real, that girl could exist in a school, or a girl with her qualities could exist. Her story could have happened. A lot of girls like myself have a diary where we write down our thoughts. I Survived. I Survived is another perfect example of realistic fiction because even though the book itself is not real, the actual events are not real, the character is real A, the event is real B, so it could have happened, but it didn't happen. So it's realistic fiction because it's fiction that could have been real. It lastly applies for the Diary of the Wimpy Kid. Even though the Diary of the Wimpy Kid is not an actual person in real life, it's not an actual story, it didn't actually happen in a real city, it's something that could be real. Those characters could be real. The setting is in a school, which is a real place. So that's the difference between realistic fiction and just regular fiction books. Fiction books are just straight up fake. It's made up characters, it's animals that talk, things like that. And realistic fiction are books that have characters and settings that could have happened. Okay, let's move on. So we're going to go ahead and start with the elements of fiction, or different things that a fiction story has in it. So the first thing that a fiction story has in it is characters. So characters can either be people, animals, or things in a story. Usually in most stories we have a protagonist, which is a good character, so like the good person in the story, and then we have an antagonist, which is like the evil person in the story. So one big thing is that when identifying characters in our stories, we do not identify all of the characters, because a lot of our stories can have up to 10 characters and we don't want to identify all of them. We just want to identify the main and most important ones. So like I told you guys earlier, we're going to use the Three Little Pigs, the story. So I want you to take a second and I want you to think about who are the main characters in that book. Just the main ones, not all of them. Who are the main characters? Okay, if you guessed the wolf and the three pigs, you are correct. Yes, those are our main characters. Even though the grandma does take is part of the story. She's just part of the story for like a very bit, for a very second, for like a page and two, so that doesn't make her a main character. The wolf and the three little pigs are in most of those stories, so those would be considered our characters. Excellent. Okay, then the next story element, there's 5. So that was number 1, this is number 2. A second story element in a story is a setting. So the setting is where a story takes place. It helps the reader, you, picture where the story is taking place. And one big thing I want you to remember is that setting not only includes place, but it can include time. For example, daytime or nighttime. So just as we did for characters, I want you to take a second. I want you to think about the 3 little pigs, and I want you to think about where was their setting. Where did it take place? Where was it? Where was it at? And what time was it? Yes, if you guess that it took place in the 3 houses. Now, if we look at these 3 houses, would these 3 houses belong in a city, a farm? Yes, a farm. They would belong in a farm. So we're going to go with farm. Now, thinking back about the story, the 3 little pigs, did it take place during daytime or nighttime? Excellent. Yes, it took place during the daytime. So our setting would be on a farm during the daytime. Next, now let's go to our third story element, which is plot. So a plot is usually one that gets a lot of us confused, but the easiest way I want you to think about plot is beginning, middle, and end. That's the easiest way to think about it. Beginning, middle, and end. So when you think about plot, I want you to think about beginning, middle, and end. So what happened at the beginning of a story, what happened in the middle of a story, and what happens at the end of a story. So for example, here the story we have of our princess and the frog. The princess finds a frog. That's the beginning. In the middle of the story, she doesn't want to kiss the frog, as we can tell by her face. She's like, ew. But she kisses the frog. That's the middle. And in the end, she falls in love with the frog. So using these same things, I want you to take a minute and I want you to think about, how does this apply to the story of the 3 little pigs? Go ahead and think. Excellent. Yes. So at the very beginning, we know that the wolf goes to the straw house, completely blows it down, is done with the house, right? Then he goes to the second house, which is made out of wood, and he struggles a bit and he blows and he blows and he blows, but eventually down it goes. Then in the end, he gets to the brick house. And what happens at the brick house? Yes, it's too strong and he cannot blow it down. So when we think about plot as beginning, middle, and end, we summarize the story in 3 small pieces instead of telling the story from by every detail. Excellent. Let's move to the next part. So now we're going to talk about problem. So the problem is a conflict within the story. Something that happens to a character that needs to be fixed or solved. It's the main issue, the main struggle. Basically, what I want you to think about, it is the main problem. The problem is the biggest conflict in the story with the characters. So here, as we can tell, these people are having a problem with whatever they were going on with their story. I want you to think about the 3 little pigs. What was the main problem? Take a second and think. Yes, the main problem was that the wolf wanted to knock down all of their houses. He A, managed to knock down the straw, B, went on in and knocked down the wood, and C, he's coming for the one with the bricks. So the problem was that he wanted to knock down their houses. Excellent. Now, our very last story element, which is going to be solution. So the solution is how the problem or conflict is solved. The solution, I want you to remember something. The solution usually comes at the end of the story, and it involves the main character solving their problem. So as we just saw in the other slide, if the problem was that the wolf was knocking down the houses because they were weak, then how did they solve this? Let's take a moment and think. Yes, The three little pigs ended up figuring out, hey, our houses are getting knocked down because they're weak. They're not strong enough. The wolf has a very strong blow. So they ended up building a house full of bricks. And that's how they solved their problem of the big bad wolf. Excellent. So very quick. Okay, so for a quick wrap up, we have 5 story elements in fiction. They are characters, which are the people, the animals that take place in a story. The setting, where something takes place, which could be daytime, nighttime, farm, house, city, field, lake, ocean. We have the plot, which tells us the beginning, the middle, and end. And we have the problem, which is the main conflict with the main characters. And then we have the solution, which is how the characters solve their problem. Now, some more things that I want you to quickly remember before we go. So, about fiction. A, the author writes about made-up creatures, places, and events. Fiction is always about creatures like this dinosaur, this superhero, this genie, that are made up. They're creatures that cannot exist. However, we do have realistic fiction, such as the ones in I Survived and Junie B. Jones, that could be real but are not. B, the writer many times includes personal opinions. So in fiction, because it is fake, there can be a lot of opinions. Let's remember that an opinion is something that is made up. For example, Miss Alas is the best teacher. It's clearly an opinion because some kids might think that and some kids might think, no way, there's way better teachers than that. Next, the pictures are usually not realistic. So the best way to tell apart fiction and realistic fiction is that fiction has pictures like these, like the genie, like the dinosaur, like the dragon. Those pictures right away tell you that it's fake or fiction. And lastly, D, many times animals or creatures may talk. So in a lot of fiction stories, just like the Three Little Pigs, animals talk. And we all know that's not true. Okay, so going back to our objective, I can identify the story elements of a fiction story using the Three Little Pigs. We were A, able to review what is fiction. B, we were able to review what are our 5 main story elements. And C, we were able to use those with the Three Little Pigs. So, great job, guys.